In today's video, I'll be showing a run through of how we do a Ford Territory headliner. This is a later model, so it's got the number 6 light oyster fabric, similar to the Ford Falcon FG. They just come in for the usual headliner repairs. You can see up the front and in the middle it's quite sagging quite badly. It's just because the foam behind the material has gone all old and crumbly. That's what usually turns orange, just detaches itself from the actual board and makes the fabric fall down. So first of all, we like to test the interior lights, make sure everything's working before we make a start. On this one, those 4 plugs at the back, you've got the 2 in the middle there and 2 right at the back. If they're a round style, that would indicate that the fabric is the number 6 light oyster, which is that more of the modern FG type of material. But if they're an oval shape, that would be a later model Ford Territory, and they would use the number 7 light grey cappuccino. That's how we identify what fabric to use on these jobs. So if you are purchasing the fabric to do your own job, that's how we identify what one to use, whether the number 6 or number 7 material. So because you can see the plastics are very similar to the FG on this one, and that would be the number 6 light oyster. We gently just remove the sun visors, the grab handles, go through the whole car, take off what needs to be taken off. So drop down those sun visors by gently removing those screws. We do keep the pillars in place on this car because we can actually flex the headliner board away from those pillars, because most headliner boards don't go down that deep anyway. So you can see here we just slightly flex it away from the A pillars. And those B pillars, it's only just sitting on top. You can see maybe about 10 mil sitting underneath the pillar there. This back section, just be gentle, slightly flex that out. It comes to the interior light now. To drop down this board, the center interior light would be holding it up. My approach here is to bring the headliner forward by gripping at the front and then just kind of shifting the whole headliner forward. That detaches the 3 plugs in the center interior light. Just basically the weight of the headliner just brings it down. I like that approach better than using trim removal tools, because you can't really get access to those 3 plugs. Even if you take the lens cap off, you can see them, but there's not much room to get under there and ply it off, and you can sometimes break plastic. So my approach is just to gently bring the whole headliner board forward and away towards the windshield, and then that drops down the interior light dome in the middle. So now we're just going to gently unplug all the wiring to the sunglasses console or the just front dual map lights there. Peel back this wiring on the board. It's held by usually tape on this one. Slide that interior dome back through the middle there. Turn off the interior light so you're not going to be resting the dome on any interior parts and accidentally burning a hole. But then you can see these 3 plugs that we've got to remove. So what I'll do now is I'll take them off the car, load them back into position. That way they're ready to be pushed up. So once we get this headliner all recovered back in the car, put it all back into position, push the headliner up, and then we can just pop this interior dome back into position. So yeah. The next step is to unplug the wiring from the rear courtesy light. We like to place the all the equipment just gently down on the floor well. We go ahead now and drop down this front unit. On the sunglasses console you would have 6 screws, and on this dome light you would have 4. You gently do it by hand, just because those plastic chambers can have like little hairline fractures in them, or they can be broken just by age or the way that it's been put in from the factory production line. So we like to spray with the CRC or lubricant just into those chambers on the screws. That way when we go to reinstall, everything just slides in really easily. Next, we are going to take out this whole headliner board, being a wagon or a hatchback, straight out the back here. Just gently take it out, flexing it so it doesn't scrape along the interior parts and scratches or leaves a mark behind. Our main focus here is just to flex the headliner board enough so it doesn't drag along the side pillars, otherwise you might scuff or mark it. So you can see a couple little stress marks on the board when we were flexing it out. That's no drama. We can always repair that on the bench with just some cloth tape and overlapping the material just to re-strengthen those areas. You can see we're peeling off the old material. You can see the foam behind has gone all old and crumbly. It also usually turns orange as well. So that's a good sign that it's going to be easy to probably buzz off and clean, because otherwise if the foam was too new, you're going to have to sit there for a long time trying to remove that foam. So Old foam is good for us because it's easier to take off. We're going to remove the old foam just using a cordless drill. We've got a little nylon attachment, just basically speed up the process on buzzing off that old foam. You can also use a handheld brush here. We used to use just a straw brush or a little nylon handheld brush. Sometimes we do switch over to an orbital sander in case there's some glue added that needs to be sanded down or imperfections on the roof lining board itself. But that's only if the board can withstand some aggressive sanding. Otherwise, you've just got to use more of a hand approach. We've done one side now. We've got to move to the next side. Dust it off. Make sure there's no little dust particles or anything like that on the board ready for new glue. We're just going to tidy up those little stress marks on the board. They're quite common on headliner boards that split really easily. Do a couple of layers of some cloth tape, nice and neat, without overlapping too much, otherwise you might see the imperfection come through on the finished product. Today we are using the number 6 light oyster fabric for this particular Ford territory, which is a later model territory. When it comes to Ford territories, we use 2 styles of headliner material to match to the factory finish, number 7 light grey and number 6 light oyster. The light oyster approach is what we use when the interior looks like the later model finish, which is similar to the Ford Falcon FG. Now when spraying glue, make sure you don't puddle the glue or spray too much in one area, otherwise it can seep through the material. Also with this glue setup, if you spray too far away from the job, you're going to catch air and it's going to basically dry all stringy when it hits the board. So, or it can all build up and almost like that rubbery type of compound that we're looking at here. So we like to just remove any pieces that could give off an imperfection on the final job. So you just pick off all those big lumps or anywhere that it's kind of bulked up. So it's very ideal to spray very even. So we like to overlap about 50% each time. Spray both the board and the back of the material, then bring the two together. We're using an off-cut piece of headlining material to push down evenly on the fabric to make sure it adheres to the board nice and even. And just make sure you really focus on pushing down the fabric around all the curves on the headliner, all the high stress areas. You always want to make sure you've got good glue coverage in those areas too. So this area here, you can see how it kind of bridges off the top there and then it falls down into this crevice. You really want to make sure that you're not stretching the fabric in those areas and you're making it kind of sink into those areas, pushing it down, making sure there's a lot of slack in the fabric and it's not ready to bounce back out of those sections. We can use a bit of friction just by rubbing as well over the whole job to remove imperfections, but we also do hit it up with a steamer, or you can leave it out in the sun as well to just make sure the imperfections just swell out. Also, after you install the job, normally after a few warm days, the fabric kind of expands and settles, and if there is any imperfections, it would look much better after a few warm days. So we gently put it back in. We've also got the material overlapped on the board now, so it's much easier to slide it back in without creasing the board too much, because now the board hasn't got those sharp edges and we've actually got it overlapped. Those plugs give a good idea about whether you got the board all lined up, because if they're not going to line up properly, those plugs are not going to go in. This is the finished product. It looks perfect. If you're looking for the glues and the fabrics that we use, we'll have links in our description below to our eBay page.